today in the Capital TV show from Washington, D.C., Ambassador General Gerald Fierstein. He's a former Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of State. You are most welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Ambassador. There is lots of story we're going to talk about. So let's start about the complex that houses a factory that makes Iranian drones. It has suffered a major explosion days after Israel had claimed that Iran was providing drones to Hamas in Gaza. How do you think about this this targeted that Iran is facing? Maybe Israel is responsible of it.
Well, very interesting. I had not actually seen that that piece of news, but of course, it would not be surprising if the Israelis were able to retaliate that way. After all, as you said, they have certainly accused Iran of providing the drone technology not only to Hamas, but also to the Houthis in Yemen.
They think that Gaza is controlled by Hamas, and there is no party can play in that area politically wise. And this war that happened, it reflected positively on the situation of Hamas in the region.
Yes, well, certainly Hamas thinks that it was to their benefit that they engaged Israel this way, even though, of course, the Palestinians in Gaza suffered enormously from Israeli retaliation, but unfortunately, we're in a situation now where in fact Hamas can play this role and achieve some popular support from the Palestinians because of their desperation in this serious situation that they're confronting.
Who do you think that who can rebuild Gaza Strip, and what obstacles stand in the way?
Well, I think that we've seen, of course, that the Biden administration has said that they would participate in efforts to rebuild, repair the damage to Gaza, and that's important. The international community will step up. But of course, the situation is that unless there's progress in resolving the broader issues that confront Palestinians and Israelis, to try to achieve some stability and some way forward, this is going to be a situation that simply repeats itself, and that even if the international community aids a reconstruction, it is only going to be until the next time that there is an outbreak of violence in Gaza.
Mm-hmm. Do you think now the region of the conflict between Israel and Palestine is a priority for Biden administration, especially after what do you expect from the visit of Blinken to Gaza soon, and Biden gonna appoint an ambassador to Israel?
Yes, I think it's a very good question. We know, of course, that the Israel-Palestine issue is not a priority for the administration until now. Perhaps it is now. I think the fact that Secretary Blinken is going there is a good sign that they understand that this situation requires urgent attention and requires a way forward. So I hope that we're going to see not only a visit by the secretary, not only an appointment of a new ambassador, and the person who's being speculated here in Washington, Tom Nides, is a very experienced, very capable career diplomat. That would be positive. But it's also important that the administration reopen channels of communication directly with the Palestinians. After the Trump administration closed our consulate general in Jerusalem, we have not had a regular channel. We need that as well. So we need to reopen the consulate general. We also need for the Palestinians to reopen their office here in Washington.
Mm. I want to go back to rebuilding Gaza after the war, the 11 days war. People don't want that Hamas will take the money, and especially, the initiative of the Egyptian initiative to give $500 million for rebuilding. So, how do you think that Hamas is representing the people there?
Well, I think that if they're representing, they're doing a bad job because obviously Gaza is in a terrible situation economically, politically, security-wise. Unfortunately, the people don't see that they have much of an alternative. And of course, the Palestinian Authority canceled the elections that were supposed to happen this month. So unfortunately, I think that we're stuck right now with Hamas in control of Gaza. One hopes that there is a new leadership, a new generation of Palestinians coming forward who can provide a new vision for the Palestinian people of how they might go forward and develop their economy and their political system so that people aren't relying on Hamas anymore.
How do you think about the conflict between the government in Palestine? I mean, the PLO and Hamas. Yesterday we saw a conflict. So there is no one side you can talk with or one decision maker. So how do you think about it?
Yes, I mean this is a very unfortunate situation that we have where the West Bank and Gaza are under different political leaderships. They can't cooperate, they can't coordinate their efforts, and this has been a real obstacle for making progress in trying to resolve the outstanding issues with Israel.
Did Iran, in your opinion, instigate latest Gaza escalation? You know the Tehran's close ties to both Hamas and the Islamic Jihad.
Well, I think that as we understand it, the real provocation came from events in Jerusalem that were driven by a number of actions that the Israeli authorities took to enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque with police force, to close the plaza outside of the Damascus Gate, and also, of course, the issues related to evictions of Palestinian families in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in Jerusalem. So those are the immediate issues that were creating this very fragile situation inside not only Gaza, but more broadly within the Palestinian communities in the occupied territories and in Jerusalem and even in Israel. There's no question that Hamas took advantage of this situation to try to present themselves as the defenders of broader Palestinian interests. Whether or not they were encouraged to do that by the Iranians, it created a very unfortunate set of circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Ambassador, there was an article in New York Times talking about how does the conflict strengthen Netanyahu. Do you have any comment on this?
Well, and this is the other side. On the one side, we've talked about how Hamas has claimed that their engagement with Israel strengthened their position, made them more popular with the Palestinians. And Bibi Netanyahu is saying the same thing on the Israeli side, that unfortunately, when you have these kinds of conflicts, of violence between the two sides, the most extreme elements are the ones who benefit. And so Netanyahu was able to set aside the political situation that was moving towards finally ending his tenure as prime minister and perhaps building some support within the Israeli community that was frightened by the actions of Hamas.
Mm-hmm. Secretary of State Blinken said that President Biden is working to lift sanctions on Iran, even though Iran funds terror. What do you think about this decision?
Well, I think that this is very consistent with what President Biden said when he was a candidate last year. and very consistent with the policies that he's tried to implement, which is to begin with reestablishing the Joint Comprehensive Plan for Iran nuclear, and then hopefully to move on from there to address some of the other issues that are problematic in the community, including Iranian support for terrorism, its threats against its neighbors, interference in the internal affairs of its neighbors. But the Biden administration has been very clear from the beginning that they believe re-entering the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA, is the essential starting point, and that would mean some relaxation in the sanctions that have been imposed by the Trump administration.
Let's talk in this last part about inside USA. There is a question, why are progressive Democrats taking pains to denounce Islamophobia when responding to an acute crisis of anti-Semitism?
Well, I think that these two things are very much linked, and I think we can go even beyond that. There's a real problem with Islamophobia in this country. There's a real problem with anti-Semitism in this country. There are also problems with misogyny and racism in this country. And I think that we need to understand that all of these issues are linked together and that we need to address them all as a country and a society to understand that that these threats against minority populations are unacceptable, and that we as a society are going to move past that.
I have another question in this subject. Is America now extremely unsafe for Jews, especially with the silence of President Biden, which is deafening, said an analyst?
Well, I think that if you see, in fact, President Biden spoke out very strongly about the issue of anti-Semitism just today. But the simple answer to your question, I think, is no, not at all. That for the most part, the safety and security of minority populations in the United States is strong, but that doesn't mean that we haven't seen an uprise in these kinds of attacks and actions against minority populations. And again, all of these issues are linked. We need to address them all as a single problem, a single challenge.
Someone explained that the recent violent anti-Semitic attacks on Jews in America are directly related to the extremely loud voices in the Democratic Party's Hamas caucus. What does it mean?
Well, I don't think, first of all, that there's any such thing as a Hamas caucus in the Democratic Party. I think that there are a number of Democrats who include many of the leading Jewish senators and representatives, people like Bernie Sanders and others, and many others who've been historically strong supporters of Israel, who are extremely concerned by what they see as a rise in racism and bigotry inside of Israel, and who believe that the recent incidents, both in Jerusalem and elsewhere in Israel, are very troubling and have spoken out about that. So I don't think that that means that they're in favor of Hamas. I think it means that they're in favor of political and diplomatic steps to resolve the conflict between Israelis and Palestinians in a way that respects the interests and the rights of both parties.
Ambassador Gerard Feuerstein, thank you for your time. Thank you for this interview.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.